the two leaders of the countries makes a lot of sense. And it's been a couple of years since the prime minister was here in the U.S., so it's good to host him here again. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see what comes out of this.
So we have seen the strengthening of relationship between India and USA, both under the leadership of President Trump and Joe Biden. And the relationship and converges is not only on bilateral issues, but also on multilateral fora as well. How do you see that going forward?
Well, I think the big challenge that confronts India and the United States is how to deal with China. I think the view in the United States, shared to a large extent across party lines, is that China is a large threat to the U.S. and its friends and allies around the world, with its hegemonic aspirations, not just in Asia but beyond. It's been stealing intellectual property for a long time. It's been trying to bully and intimidate countries along its Pacific and Indian frontiers, and a lot is going to depend on how the countries in the region align with countries outside the region to deal with it. And the two most important countries in that complex situation are India and the United States. I think it's been very important that India has joined with Japan and Australia and the U.S. in the Asian Security Quad. But I think there are a lot of other questions as well. You know, there's a debate, at least I see the debate by some in India who say that closer security relations with the U.S. and others is important. But I see others in India say, no, we should try and hedge between the United States and China. I understand there's a long history here. I just say I think it's very difficult to walk a tightrope like that. And I think India's interests lie in closer relations with the United States. And I hope that's the view that Prime Minister Modi increasingly accepts, because I think that would contribute to the security both of India and the United States and many other countries too.
Right. So recently, Prime Minister Modi and President Biden met during the Quad Summit in Hiroshima, Japan, and both leaders reaffirmed their commitment in the Indo-Pacific that is inclusive and resilient. What are your views on that, since we know that China has been aggressive in Indo-Pacific?
Well, I think China's effort along its periphery is to search for weak spots. Its current focus, I think, is generally agreed to be Taiwan, but it has conducted really belligerent activity in the South China Sea over an extended period of time, making military bases out of islands whose status is really in dispute. The recent visit of Xi Jinping to Moscow, I think, has been intended to show there's really a new axis between those countries. And I think these developments, including many others, the Belt and Road Initiative that China has been following for many years, demonstrate they are following what they believe, at least, to be a coherent strategy. We, on the other hand, are not following a coherent strategy. And this poses a lot of difficult questions. I think India has to face the hardest questions, given the relationship, for example, with Russia on the weapons side and during the Cold War, I think is clearly disadvantageous to India today. But it's obviously up to India to make that decision. And I think that's one of the subjects that the two leaders should talk about.
So what are your views of Prime Minister Modi as a global leader?
Well, look, as the leader of India, he certainly is by definition a global leader. I think he's got strong opinions on a lot of subjects. I think one of the subjects that will be discussed here in Washington will be trade relations between the two countries and integration of India, not just in the WTO context in international affairs on the economic side, but more broadly. I think that's very important. I think India has a lot of opportunities here as you see American, Japanese, European companies unwinding their supply chains in China, not making additional capital commitments. India, it seems to me, provides a very attractive place that they might consider going. Having access to millions of people who speak English is a huge competitive advantage for India. And so there are real areas here where greater cooperation, certainly between the US and India, can provide enormous benefits for both countries.
So my last question, in terms of tangible outcomes, what are your expectations from the visit in terms of trade, defense, security, and other areas of cooperation, since we know that there are some defense deals which are high on agenda during the visit of Prime Minister Modi to the US?
Well, I think the defense side is the most visible, most palpable manifestation of closer cooperation. And I do understand the history with India, but there have been recent difficulties like the purchase of the Russian S-400 air defense system, which makes it impossible for the U.S. to share some of its advanced technology, stealth technology, and the F-35 and the like. And I know it's wrenching for India to pull away from that longstanding high-tech weapons relationship with Russia. But if you consider this on the basis of India's self-interest, I think it is appropriate to do. And if between the U.S. and India we can have a few agreements that come out of this summit, I think that would be a plus. I think India has lots of opportunities to expand its own defense industry indigenously, and I think that's something to be looked at as well.
So how do you think that this visit is going to be looked by the global leaders around the world?
Well, I think in the Indo-Pacific region, every other country is going to be looking to see if the India-U.S. relationship is going to grow closer because they feel even more threatened by China. They're all, with the exception of Japan, much smaller, really, than India in terms of economic weight. And they lack the capacity in the region to stand independently against China. It requires assistance and cooperation from larger powers in the region and externally. And I think any signals from New Delhi and Washington that the relationship is growing closer will be welcomed through that entire sweep of the Indo-Pacific.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, Ambassador, for speaking to us and giving your time. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.